If you guys are familiar with my work, you know I love talking about attachment trauma, the original wound, healing the inner child, and our emotional wounds. In this video, I want to go deep into not only our original attachment trauma, but how we create an attachment trauma with ourselves repeatedly. Watch this video. For those of you that are new to my work, I just want to let you know that what I do is spiritual coaching. What that is a hybrid of all these different certifications I've had over the years of spiritual psychology, Reiki, yoga, holistic nutrition, health, and wellness, and meditation. All of those together, plus 20 years of studying spiritual law, has really created this new thing that I call spiritual coaching, which is just taking mind, body, soul, and really using my own ability to tap in intuitively and empathically to understand you, your situation, and the greater scale of what's really going on. Much of my work is about healing original wounds and understanding things that we all know about to a different dimension by using insight and spiritual clarity. So what I want to dive into today is something that I had to obviously go through in my own life as well, which is around attachment trauma. Not only the original wound, but really how we re-injure ourselves. And it's almost like the re-injury all the time. You'll see this in unwanted patterns. You'll see this in events that pop up that trigger a massive emotional reaction to you that doesn't really make sense with the level of circumstance. So I want to talk about the attachment trauma we create with ourselves. If you don't know what attachment trauma is, it's really when you have that original relationship between you and your mother, usually. Mother, father, someone very close to you that is your parent, that is your, what we think, God at the time of birth. And when we have an attachment trauma, it means our attachment to them isn't secure. It isn't safe. Something happened to sever that connection. And as little as it was or as big as it was, it doesn't really matter what the event was. It created this trauma within you. And that's what's important, is to really validate that you had this experience where you felt, even though you don't know maybe where it came from. I'll describe to you my own, how I figured it out. But you have this feeling of being totally disconnected to not only them, but self. And when more spiritual groups talk about the original wound, it's really your first feeling of separation from source, which in my experience is also self, because the wise guide lives inside. So this is what I'm going to be relating with today. Me personally, when I was in high school, there was an event that happened that wasn't even a serious event at all. And it triggered an original wound of feeling separate from my caretaker, of feeling like I didn't deserve to belong to the collective, to my tribe. And it was so interesting because anyone watching that situation would have been like, what are you talking about? Of course you belong, of course, blah, blah, blah. But it really triggered this memory for me. And immediately I had a vision come up. I'm sitting in the lunchroom in high school. I'm experiencing this thing with friends. And I have this vision come up of me breastfeeding and being torn away and having the same emotional experience I was having that day of feeling almost separated from my tribe. And so I went home that day from school and I asked my mom, I said, Mom, I had this really intense vision of breastfeeding. Did something happen during the time I was breastfeeding? And she looked at me and she was like, wow, yes, something did happen. I lost my milk overnight because of an emotional experience my mom was going through. And she said, you looked up at me and there was no milk for you. And you looked at me like, what did I do wrong? Like terror. She goes, you were never fully the same. There was always an emotional fear in you. And I thought that was extremely interesting because it was the first time I probably felt not only detached from my source of nourishment, survival, but I felt detached from my tribe. Like, why can't I be part of this, right? Then it was a re-wounding at 7 years old where a similar thing happened, and then 15 years old, a similar thing. So for me, I was really aware of the first time right away. I didn't know what to do with those emotions. I didn't know what was going on. But what I did notice is when I was being sort of reintroduced to that wound or that trauma, the emotions of that trauma, that pain body, came up real strong, and I didn't have any tools or awareness of how to deal with it. And so what I did is I created the attachment trauma with self. I left self. That's what happens with a lot of us who are going through a self attachment trauma, is we have those negative emotions that come up from the original wound. We don't know what to do with them or how to even control them. We think it's us. We think it means all these things. We get re-triggered and re-wounded. And the way that a lot of us deal with that is we leave self so that we don't have to deal or feel with those emotions. And so what that does is it keeps that original trauma alive. It keeps it there. We can create these lives outside of it, these band-aids, these situations, so that we don't have to feel this, so that we can insulate ourselves from that negative emotion. An example of that is if you're afraid of rejection, you'll make yourself a certain way, or you'll design your life in a certain way so that you don't have to feel rejection. But what's interesting is, by doing this to myself over and over again in my teens and 20s, I got to the point where I was like, let me turn around and go the other direction. Instead of running from it, instead of facilitating a life that keeps me safe from whatever it is I'm afraid to feel, right? Because when you get real about how you feel, you begin to heal. But if you don't do that, if you don't go into that, if you keep running from that feeling, that scary big monster inside, if you keep running from it, it will always be there. What I did is I got really tired of sabotage and patterns and attachment flare-ups, where I finally was like, screw this. I'm going to go into it and see what I can feel and see what I can do. And when I started going into it, I realized it meant I wasn't leaving myself anymore. I wasn't detaching from myself anymore. I wasn't recreating my attachment trauma, meaning insecure attachment. Am I being conditional with myself? Do I leave myself when I have a negative emotion? Or do I go into myself and explore what is behind that negative emotion? This is not an easy process, and I don't suggest doing it alone. If you have a coach, or you have a friend, or you have someone that you trust, feel free to do it with them. If it doesn't feel like it's too big, pick out one of your journals and start writing with yourself. There's many writing exercises that I teach in my monthly membership. Check that out if you want to be part of that. It's only $19 a month, and it's a community of people who are doing this work together. So you can start to get familiar with sharing this and realizing you're A, not alone, but B, that you can heal this. So the first part is to not attach from ourselves when we have a negative emotion. When this attachment, this trauma, this emotion, this shame comes up, we exit. And that's what we've been taught. We've been taught when we're kids, if we have a negative emotion or we behave badly, we get left, we get punished, we don't get loved, we get criticized. And so many of us are running away from that criticism. We're running away from our internalized inner critic, who's constantly there, so that you can continue that original story that, see, I got criticized because of me. I wasn't loved because of me. I did something wrong. There's something wrong with me. And what's interesting is when we do this work and we train ourselves into being unconditional with what we feel, you don't have to leave yourself if you feel negative. You don't have to leave yourself if you think you did something wrong, if there's a mistake that came up in the world. But instead, what you can do is stay with you, stay attached to you, stay connected to you, stay in you. And what happens when you stay in you is you're bringing your presence into a really scary experience, and you're noticing that I'm still here. You're noticing that that fear and that scary experience is because of the void of leaving self. When we're babies and we have an attachment trauma, that attachment trauma feels like, not only do I not get to connect with mom or dad, I don't get to connect with me. I lose myself because of another. How many of you have codependent patterns going on where you feel like I can't just be in my autonomy? I can't just be who I am in this relationship. And if I fall too much in love, I fall into enmeshment and lose myself again. Or if I don't attune to them, they leave me. There's all these traumas going on that we can really start to make less by really going to the core and staying with ourselves and saying, regardless of what I feel, regardless of what I'm going through, regardless of what anyone else outside of me thinks, I'm with me. Try that. please check the links below. Emotional Rehab is going to be launching April 1st. Inner Work group coaching has launched, so we're starting March 1st. See if you can sign up below on that. And please share and subscribe, and I will see you soon. Namaste.